Right now, somewhere on this planet, a 5-year-old orangutan is casually hanging from a branch by one arm, 40 feet above the ground, without a single thought crossing its mind about falling. You, an adult human being with a fully developed brain, cannot do that. Not because you're weaker. In some ways, you're actually stronger. You simply don't have the equipment anymore. And the reason why traces back to a foot bone, a hormone, and a decision your ancestors made roughly 2 million years ago that your body has never been allowed to undo. Let's start with the part that sounds almost unbelievable the first time you hear it. A chimpanzee, at rest, doing absolutely nothing athletic, can generate roughly twice the grip strength of an elite adult human male. Not twice the strength relative to body size. Twice the raw force. Period, despite chimps being noticeably smaller and lighter than most adult humans. For decades, scientists assumed this gap came down to muscle. Bigger, denser muscle fibers, maybe better leverage. Then in 2017, a team led by biologist Matthew O'Neill at the University of Arizona actually dissected and measured chimpanzee arm and hand muscles directly, fiber by fiber, and compared them to human tissue. What they found surprised almost everyone in the field. Chimp muscle fibers weren't dramatically stronger per unit of muscle than human ones. The real difference was proportional. Chimps devote a far larger percentage of their total body muscle mass to their arms, shoulders, and hands than humans do, because their entire survival strategy for millions of years depended on those muscles working constantly. Humans reallocated that muscle budget elsewhere, mostly downward, into legs built for walking efficiently across open ground rather than swinging efficiently through a canopy. That reallocation is only half the story, though, because strength alone wouldn't explain why you can't climb like an ape even if you trained like an Olympic athlete for the rest of your life. The other half is anatomical, and it starts at your feet. Here's something most people never think about. Your big toe cannot move independently from the rest of your foot. Try it right now if you want. Wiggle your big toe away from your other toes as far as it will go. It barely moves, if at all. Now picture a chimpanzee's foot. Its big toe operates almost like a thumb, fully opposable, capable of grasping a branch with the same precision your hand grips a coffee mug. Human feet lost that ability entirely, and for a long time, nobody could pin down exactly when that transition happened, or what specific evolutionary pressure caused it. That changed with fossil evidence out of a site in Ethiopia. In 2011, researchers led by anthropologist Carol Ward published an analysis of a fossilized foot bone belonging to Australopithecus afarensis, the same species as the famous fossil Lucy, dated to roughly 3.2 million years ago. The bone in question was a fourth metatarsal, a small bone from the middle of the foot, but its shape told an enormous story. It showed clear evidence of a rigid, arched foot structure, virtually identical in function to a modern human foot, built for pushing off the ground during upright walking rather than grasping branches overhead. This was one of the clearest signals yet that full bipedalism, and the corresponding loss of grasping feet, was already locked in place over 3 million years ago, hundreds of thousands of years before our genus Homo even existed. Which raises an obvious question: why would evolution trade away something as clearly useful as a grasping, climbing foot? The answer connects to a much bigger anatomical trade-off, one that becomes obvious the moment you compare a human pelvis to a chimpanzee's. A chimp's pelvis is long, narrow, and built to accommodate powerful hip muscles suited for climbing and quadrupedal movement through trees. A human pelvis is short, wide, and bowl-shaped, engineered around a completely different problem: keeping your entire upper body balanced directly over 2 feet while walking upright, without your torso wobbling wildly with every step. Anthropologists studying this shift, including work published by biomechanist Hermann Pontzer at Duke University, have shown that upright, efficient bipedal walking requires an extremely specific pelvic architecture, one fundamentally incompatible with the flexible hip rotation needed for serious tree climbing. You cannot have both body plans optimized simultaneously. Evolution had to pick a lane, and roughly 2 million years ago, with the emergence of Homo erectus, it picked walking, decisively and permanently. This wasn't a small tweak, it was a full-body redesign. Homo erectus fossils show longer legs relative to arm length than any earlier hominin, a shorter, more efficient rib cage, and a narrower pelvis optimized for endurance walking and running rather than climbing. Every one of those changes that made you better at covering long distances on the ground made you measurably worse at climbing trees. But there's a piece of this story that almost nobody talks about because it's not written in bone. It's written in hormones, and it might be the single strangest twist in the entire tale. In 2018, a team of researchers led by biologist Herman Poncer, working alongside colleagues studying testosterone across primate species, published findings comparing hormone profiles between humans and other great apes. What they discovered was that adult male chimpanzees experience dramatically higher and more volatile testosterone spikes than adult human males, particularly during periods of competition or territorial conflict, and that this hormonal difference correlates strongly with upper body explosive strength, the exact kind of raw power needed for rapid climbing, branch swinging, and aggressive display behavior. Human testosterone patterns, by comparison, are comparatively blunted and stable, a shift researchers increasingly connect to humans evolving toward long-term pair bonding, cooperative child-rearing, and reduced male-to-male physical competition, compared to the more combative social structures common in chimpanzee groups. In other words, part of the reason you can't outclimb a chimp isn't just about foot shape or muscle distribution. Your entire hormonal system was quietly retuned over millions of years, favoring endurance and social cooperation over the kind of explosive, aggressive strength climbing demands. Put those threads together, and something remarkable emerges. Losing the ability to climb like an ape wasn't a single event, it was a cascade, one adaptation triggering the next, each one making the previous choice more permanent. A pelvis reshaped for walking, made climbing biomechanically harder. Feet that could no longer grasp branches made trees actively dangerous instead of a viable escape route. A hormonal profile shifted away from raw explosive strength, made even attempting extreme climbing physically less feasible. Every piece reinforced every other piece until there was no reasonable path back to the canopy. Here's where the story gets genuinely unsettling once you sit with it. This transformation happened at exactly the moment our ancestors most needed an escape option. 2 million years ago, the East African savanna was crawling with predators perfectly suited to open, grassland terrain: lions, hyenas, saber-toothed cats. For millions of years before that, trees had been the single most reliable defense a primate had. Climb high enough, and almost nothing could follow. Homo erectus walked away from that option permanently, right as the landscape itself was becoming more dangerous, not less. It's one of the boldest evolutionary gambles imaginable, trading a proven survival mechanism for an unproven one, betting an entire species' future on stamina, tool use, and social cooperation instead of vertical escape. And it worked, but the price was permanent. Every human being alive today is walking around with a body built entirely around that one ancient bet. Your feet, structurally incapable of gripping a branch the way an ape's can. Your pelvis, locked into a shape that trades hip flexibility for walking efficiency. Even your hormones, quietly tuned toward endurance and cooperation instead of raw climbing power. Human children, before they learn to walk, briefly retain something close to a primitive grasping reflex in their hands and feet. Researchers studying infant development have long noted this reflex resembles the grasping instinct still present in infant primates that cling to their mother's fur while she climbs. In humans, it fades within months, overwritten almost immediately by a nervous system already being wired for walking instead of climbing. It's a strange little echo, a few months' worth of ancient wiring flickering on in every human infant before being switched permanently off. A reminder of the body plan we left behind before you were even capable of remembering it. So the next time you watch footage of a chimpanzee flying effortlessly through a canopy, or an orangutan casually dangling one-handed 40 feet in the air without a hint of concern, understand what you're actually looking at. Not a superior animal, not a stronger one, not exactly. You're looking at a body that never had to make the trade your ancestors made. Somewhere around 2 million years ago, your lineage looked at the trees, looked at the open grasslands stretching out in every direction, and chose to walk into it anyway, permanently rewriting feet, hips, and hormones in the process. You inherited the walking, you inherited the stamina, and you inherited, permanently, the inability to ever climb quite like your closest living relatives again.